This strange sign proves you live in her head rent-free psychology tricks. The heart has reasons that reason doesn't understand. Blaise Pascal. There's a subtle sign that reveals when a woman can't stop thinking about you, and it's the last thing most men expect. In fact, when you hear it, your first instinct might be disbelief. It goes against common sense, against logic, against everything you've probably been told about attraction. Yet this signal isn't deliberate. She's not planning it. She's not even aware of it. Her rational mind might insist she's moved on. She might say it and even believe it. But beneath the surface, her unconscious behavior tells a very different story. Psychologists have observed this pattern repeatedly, especially among women who say they're completely over someone. In the majority of cases, their actions quietly contradict their words. Here's where most men go wrong. They wait for clear admissions, a message, an apology, a sudden return. They look for direct proof while overlooking the evidence that's already right in front of them. And that's the uncomfortable truth. While you've been questioning whether you even cross her mind, she's already answered that question more than once recently. The problem is, almost no one knows how to recognize the signal when it appears. That changes today. In the next few minutes, you'll learn exactly what to observe, the small but telling psychological cue that reveals you're occupying space in her thoughts, even when she's trying hard to hide it. Once you understand this, something interesting happens. You start noticing patterns, not just in her actions, but in how the people around her respond. And suddenly, what once felt like uncertainty turns into clarity. Fair warning, though, this awareness can't be undone. After this, you'll see attraction and emotional attachment through a completely different lens. So, what is this strange sign? Why does it work this way? And why is it almost never talked about? Let's break it down and explain what's really going on beneath the surface. 1. The sign nobody talks about and why it's so twisted. Here's the sign nobody talks about, and yes, it's unsettling in the quietest way. Picture this clearly. She hasn't texted you in days, maybe weeks, and you've already told yourself the story that helps you sleep at night. She's moved on, you're off her radar, you're a closed chapter. Be honest. That story feels logical. Then something small happens, almost invisible. Something that looks random on the surface, but refuses to sit right in your gut. She brings you up in conversation with mutual friends, not dramatically, just lightly. She asks about you like it's nothing, like she's merely curious. Or she suddenly appears somewhere she knows you'll be, then plays it off with a raised eyebrow and a half smile, acting surprised, acting casual, acting as if coincidence has impeccable timing. Don't dismiss this. Don't rush to call it chance. Stay with me. According to research published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, this kind of behavior isn't accidental at all. It's deliberate. It's indirect monitoring. And it's one of the clearest psychology tricks people use when they care, but refuse to say it out loud. She isn't reaching out to you directly because that would expose her. Instead, she gathers information through safe channels. She checks the temperature of your life without stepping into the room. That is not distance. That is restraint. She wants answers without vulnerability. Is he thinking about me? Is he seeing someone new? Has he emotionally relocated? And here's the part most men miss. If she truly felt nothing, she wouldn't ask at all. People who are done don't wonder. They don't circle. They don't quietly engineer moments that allow them to observe from afar. Be clear on this. Curiosity follows attachment, not indifference. This is where female psychology becomes fascinating, not mysterious. It's not about manipulation. It's about self-protection. Her ego wants safety. Her emotions want information. So she builds a bridge that lets her look without crossing. And the irony? The harder she tries to hide it, the louder it becomes. Silence paired with surveillance is not absence. It's tension. You must understand this if you want clarity instead of confusion. Many men assume interest always arrives loudly, directly, cleanly. That assumption is outdated. Interest often whispers first. It tests. It watches. It waits. That's why these psychology tricks are so effective and so misunderstood. She's not avoiding you because she doesn't care. She's avoiding exposure. There's a difference. And here's where you need discipline. Don't confront her. Don't demand explanations. Don't chase clarity in a moment designed to deny it. Be composed. Be grounded. Let the pattern reveal itself. When someone repeatedly finds ways to stay informed about you while pretending not to look, that is emotional investment wearing a disguise. This is one of the quiet foundations of how to fall in love unfolds later, slow, indirect, cautious, layered. Love doesn't always sprint forward. Sometimes it circles the block, pretending it forgot the address. Notice how she never asks you directly, but always knows what's happening. Notice how her surprise appearances happen just often enough to feel intentional. Notice how mutual friends suddenly know more about your life than you told them. That is not randomness. That is strategy shaped by feeling. And don't make the mistake of thinking this means you should act immediately. No, you must remain steady. Let her curiosity do the work. Let her uncertainty grow uncomfortable. That discomfort is what eventually pushes honesty forward. This is female psychology at its most human, balancing desire with dignity, interest with self-control. Once you see the sign, you can't unsee it. And once you understand it, you stop feeling confused and start feeling calm. Because clarity replaces guesswork. Remember this: absence plus awareness equals attachment. People who don't care disconnect completely. People who care stay quietly informed. These psychology tricks aren't games, they're signals wrapped in caution tape. Recognize them. Respect them. Don't panic. Be present. Be unmoved. That is how to fall in love without forcing it, without chasing it, without scaring it away. 2. The reverse reaction that proves you're winning. Now here's something that might stop you mid-thought. When I first learned this, I honestly believed the psychologist who told me was exaggerating, maybe even storytelling a bit too hard. But the more you watch human behavior, the clearer it becomes. When a woman is truly over you, she's neutral. Not dramatic. Not tense. Just neutral. She doesn't care if you're in the room or across the street. She doesn't scan for you. She doesn't adjust. She doesn't react. You're simply part of the background noise of life, like a stranger waiting for coffee. That is what being forgotten actually looks like. But when you live in her head, the reaction flips. Completely. And that's where things get strange. She avoids you in public, not casually, but intentionally. She takes different paths. She looks away a second too fast. She acts cold when you're near, like the temperature drops for no clear reason. Or she pretends she didn't see you, even though the timing feels almost rehearsed. Sometimes she swings the other way and overcompensates, becoming extra friendly, extra chatty, laughing a little too loud, talking a little too much, trying very hard to look relaxed. That is not comfort. That is effort. And effort always reveals investment. Psychology calls this reactivity, and it's one of the most reliable indicators that someone is emotionally involved, whether they admit it or not. Because true indifference has no temperature. It isn't warm. It isn't cold. It's nothing. Nothing at all. So if she's giving you anything, distance, tension, friendliness, avoidance, congratulations. You're not invisible. You're occupying mental space. You're living rent-free. Now pause, because I know exactly what you're thinking. But she's ignoring me. How is that a good sign? That question makes sense. It feels logical. But logic isn't how the emotional brain works. Behavioral psychology shows that the human brain uses more energy to actively ignore someone than it does to genuinely not care. Think about that. If you truly don't care about someone, you don't need to avoid them. You don't need to plan how to act around them. You don't need to manage your expressions or rehearse your tone. They just exist, like furniture you walk past every day. But when she's changing her behavior based on your presence, when she's consciously deciding whether to be distant or cheerful, when she's aware of you before you even speak, that's mental real estate. That's attention. And attention is currency. This is where many men misread the moment and sabotage themselves. Don't confront her. Don't demand clarity. Don't chase reactions. Be steady. Be composed. Be the man who doesn't flinch at mixed signals. That is what separates a reactive man from a high-value man. A high-value man doesn't panic when energy shifts. He observes. He understands patterns. He lets behaviors speak louder than words. And here's the deeper layer most people miss. Reactivity often appears when someone is trying to regain emotional balance. She feels something, doesn't like that she feels it, and then adjusts her behavior to regain control. That adjustment is the tell. That's why coldness isn't rejection here. It's regulation. And over-friendliness isn't comfort. It's compensation. This is not about games. This is about awareness. When you understand this, you stop chasing validation and start embodying calm certainty. That calm is masculine energy in its cleanest form. Not loud, not forced, just grounded. And grounded men naturally attract women because they don't beg for reactions. They allow reactions to reveal themselves. You must resist the urge to interpret every moment emotionally. Stay disciplined. Stay present. When you don't react, her reactivity becomes clearer. And clarity is power. This is why silence paired with confidence often does more than words ever could. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to win. You're simply being consistent. That consistency is what keeps you in her mind long after the interaction ends. It's also what builds attraction without effort. Many men believe attraction comes from doing more, saying more, pushing more. That belief is outdated. Attraction often comes from restraint, from letting space do the work, from allowing curiosity to grow unanswered. This is how a man learns to attract women without performing. When you carry yourself with self-respect, when you don't chase reactions, when you don't crumble under mixed signals, you naturally step into the role of a high-value man. And people feel that before they understand it. Remember this clearly. Indifference is silent. Reactivity is loud, even when it looks quiet. Don't confuse avoidance with absence of feeling. Don't confuse friendliness with closure. Watch behavior. Watch effort. Watch adjustment. That's where the truth lives. Be patient. Be observant. Be grounded in your masculine energy, not because you're trying to impress, but because you know who you are. That certainty lingers. And lingering is exactly how you end up living rent-free. If you understood this, you're already seeing what most men never notice. Because real power isn't loud interest or perfect words. It's recognizing reactivity for what it is. Indifference is silent. Reaction means you matter. Don't chase. Don't explain. Be calm. Be aware. Let behavior expose the truth. If you're ready to stop misreading signals and start moving with certainty, comment this below to lock it in. I recognize reactivity, and I no longer confuse it with rejection. 3. The friend network test. Here is the truth, stated plainly and without decoration, because clarity is power. When her friends suddenly change their behavior around you, when they ask questions that feel casual but land with precision, when your name floats through conversations you didn't start, when reactions are quietly measured the moment her name appears, you are not imagining anything, you are witnessing a psychological pattern as old as human connection itself. And this pattern proves one thing with certainty. You are still occupying space in her mind without effort on your part, rent-free, uninterrupted, and influential, and this is not romance, not drama, but human strategy unfolding in real time. Because people do not deploy social networks for things that no longer matter, they mobilize them for what still carries emotional weight, and as Marcus Aurelius warned centuries ago, nothing has such power to broaden the mind as the ability to investigate systematically and truly all that counts. Under thy observation, which means this is not about guessing her feelings, but observing behavior, because behavior never lies even when words try to, and what is happening is simple and surgical. She has handed her friends a quiet mission. Not because she wants reconciliation necessarily, but because curiosity and unresolved attachment do not shut off on command, so they become scouts, information gatherers, emotional buffers, asking about your dating life not out of idle interest, but to test. Whether seeing you move on would reopen something she claims is closed, mentioning her name casually to see if your tone shifts, sharing details she never shared directly because indirect communication feels safer. Watching your face for micro reactions because the human brain searches constantly for reassurance, and this matters to you not so you can feel validated, but so you can respond correctly, because power comes from understanding, not reacting. And this is where Old Stoic wisdom becomes your advantage, because Stoicism teaches that you do not chase signals, you interpret them, you do not confront emotion, you master your own, and as Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Meaning you do not explain yourself, you do not correct the narrative, you let actions speak because silence under observation is strength, and in modern life, where social circles overlap, texts travel fast, and reputations are shaped by perception. More than truth, your restraint becomes your message, and this is how Stoicism wins scenarios play out quietly, because the moment you act indifferent but not cold, engaged but not invested, respectful but not revealing, you force clarity without demanding it, and clarity always favors the composed man. So the instruction here is precise. Do not interrogate her friends. Do not overshare your dating status. Do not perform confidence. Live it. Answer questions briefly, honestly, and without emotional charge, because neutrality confuses people who expect reaction, and confusion shifts leverage, and leverage is not control over others, but command over yourself, which is the definition of an iron mind. Forged through repetition and discipline, not impulse, and understand this deeply. If she were truly unaffected, her friends would be indifferent. Social networks do not activate around emptiness. They activate around unresolved meaning. And the older you get, the more valuable. This insight becomes because men between 35 and 70 do not need games. They need clarity, efficiency, and self-respect. And this is not about rekindling the past. It is about mastering the present. Because unresolved attention from others only matters if it distracts you from your mission. And your mission now is stability, health, growth, and purpose. The things that compound with time, and as Seneca wrote, he who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. Meaning, do not overthink this. Do not dramatize it. Observe, adjust, and move forward, because the real victory is not being remembered, it is being unshaken. And when you walk through these interactions calm, grounded, and focused, you teach everyone watching, including her, that your life is not paused waiting for permission, and that lesson echoes longer than any conversation. So carry this with you. Old Stoic wisdom reminds you that attention is not power, self-command is. Stoicism win outcomes are built through restraint, and an iron mind does not chase validation. It attracts respect, and when you master that, you don't just understand psychology, you master life itself. 4. The digital footprint she thinks you'll never notice. What you are about to hear sounds subtle, almost invisible, yet once you see it, you cannot unsee it, because this is the digital footprint she assumes you will never connect, and it reveals more than words ever could. Be calm, be observant. Don't rush to label it, because this is not about drama, it is about awareness, and yes, it gets technical, but stay with me, because the pattern matters. She is watching you online, not loudly, not clumsily, not in a way that gives her away, but quietly, deliberately, with distance that feels accidental but never is, because she does not like your posts, she does not comment, she does not react, and that absence is not indifference, that is strategy. Don't confuse silence with disinterest, because in female psychology, silence often carries intention, and here is how you know she is there without ever announcing herself, because her friends suddenly appear under your posts with likes that seem random, but are not, because she somehow views. Stories where you appear in group settings, but never taps on yours directly, because she notices location tags you use even when you think they are harmless. Because she registers what you post, and when you post with more precision than you would expect from someone who supposedly is not paying attention, and that is where psychology tricks quietly enter the picture, not as manipulation, but as instinct. Because the human mind tracks what it values. Don't dismiss the next part, because this is where the pattern sharpens, where behavior begins to mirror behavior, where emotion quietly responds to stimulus, because her actions begin to change based on what you do, and that is the giveaway. You post a photo with another woman, nothing exaggerated, nothing explained, and suddenly she posts something too. Maybe a picture, maybe a quote, maybe a subtle signal meant for no one, and yet aimed precisely. You post about being somewhere, of a restaurant, a city, a gym, and weeks later she appears in the same place as if coincidence had a calendar. You go quiet for a few days, no posts, no stories, no signals, and she resurfaces with a casual message that pretends to be random, but arrives right on time, and don't overreact. Don't confront, don't celebrate, just notice, because this pattern has a name and understanding names gives you control, and it is called reactive posting, a psychological response to perceived competition or absence, and it happens when someone's emotional. State is influenced by another person's perceived movement forward. That is not obsession. That is attachment revealing itself through behavior. And this is where most men misread the situation, because they look for direct signals while missing indirect ones. They wait for confessions while ignoring patterns, and they chase clarity while overlooking consistency. Be smarter, be grounded, because this is not about playing games. It is about recognizing that your presence occupies mental space, that your choices ripple outward, that your silence speaks, and that is why psychology tricks work best when you don't try to use them, but understand them, because the moment you force behavior, you lose the advantage. She monitors you because you matter to her internal narrative, because your actions trigger comparison, curiosity, and emotional recalibration, because she cannot help but check whether you are moving on without her, whether you are happy, whether you are desired, whether you still intersect with her sense of possibility, and this is deeply rooted in female psychology, not as mystery, but as pattern recognition shaped by emotion and context. Don't mistake this for control. Don't assume intent where awareness is enough. Because the lesson here is not how to win, it is how to read the room without speaking, how to understand how to fall in love dynamics without forcing outcomes, how to stay steady while others react, and how to let your life speak louder than your explanations. Be consistent, be authentic, be selective with what you share. Because when you live well and post sparingly, when you move forward without announcing every step, you activate attention without demanding it. And that is one of the oldest psychology tricks there is, because mystery does not come from hiding, it comes from depth. Don't post to provoke, don't disappear to test, don't perform confidence. You must simply embody it. Because the strongest signal you can send is not a message, it is momentum. And when someone adjusts their behavior in response to yours, it tells you everything you need to know without a single word exchanged. This is how to fall in love understanding at a mature level, where you observe before you act, where you respect emotion without chasing it, where you let connection reveal itself through alignment rather than pressure. And when you see these signs clearly, you stop guessing, you stop overthinking, and you start moving with quiet certainty, because attention follows meaning, and meaning always leaves a trail. If this opened your eyes, don't scroll past it. Like the video, subscribe for more psychology tricks that sharpen your awareness, and share this with a man who needs clarity instead of confusion. Now engage with the channel and lock this insight in your mind. Comment this sentence below. Silence and movement reveal more than attention ever could. 5. Why this is actually about you. Why this is actually about you, and why that matters more than you may realize at first. Now, some of you are thinking, this sounds like mind games. This sounds manipulative. That reaction is understandable. Be honest with yourself. Most men have been trained to mistrust anything psychological, anything subtle, anything that doesn't come with clear rules and instant results. But here's the truth, and this is important. Understanding behavior is not manipulation, and awareness is not control. That is clarity. That is maturity. And that is where strength actually lives. These signs don't necessarily mean she wants you back, and you must stop forcing that conclusion, because forcing meaning is where men lose their footing. What they prove instead is something far more valuable. You made an impact. You mattered enough to be remembered. You were not background noise drifting through her life unnoticed. And that realization should not inflate your ego, it should steady your posture. Be clear about this. A high-value man does not chase validation. He does not scan every signal for reassurance. He does not replay old conversations in his head late at night, wondering what he should have said differently. When you understand that your presence left a mark, you stop waiting for permission to move forward. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes as if meaning might suddenly appear on a screen. You stop putting your life on hold, delaying decisions, delaying joy, delaying growth. That pause, that suspended state, is what drains men over time. Don't live there. You must move. You must build. You must invest your attention where it compounds. This is where the shift happens. Instead of reacting emotionally, you leverage your position, not over her, but over yourself. That is the difference most men miss. Leveraging your position means using awareness to regain momentum. It means you focus on becoming more grounded, more present, more intentional. It means you stop asking, "What does she think of me?" and start asking, "What do I think of my direction?" That question alone separates men who stagnate from men who grow. This is how a high-value man thinks. He does not deny emotion, but he does not let emotion steer the wheel. Don't confuse restraint with indifference. Be warm, but be centered. Be open, but be anchored. Masculine energy is not about force or posturing. It is about steadiness under uncertainty. When you embody that steadiness, something interesting happens. You naturally attract women without trying to convince them of anything. You stop performing. You stop explaining. You simply show up as someone whose life is already in motion. That is attractive because it signals self-trust. And self-trust is contagious. Understand this clearly. The fact that you left an impression does not mean you need to capitalize on it immediately. Don't rush. Don't press. Don't seek closure through confrontation or confession. Be patient. Time reveals alignment better than urgency ever will. When you stop pushing, you gain perspective. When you gain perspective, you make better decisions. That is how men age with confidence instead of regret. You must also release the idea that power comes from being desired. That is a fragile kind of power. Real power comes from knowing you are already whole, already moving forward, already building something that excites you. When you operate from that place, you attract women who are aligned with your direction, not just curious about your availability. This is how to attract women without chasing them, without proving yourself, without draining your energy. It starts internally, not externally. Be disciplined with your attention. Attention is currency. Spend it wisely. If you give it away too easily, it loses value. If you guard it thoughtfully, it grows. Masculine energy thrives on purpose, not preoccupation. Purpose pulls you forward. Preoccupation keeps you stuck. Choose carefully. And here is the quiet truth many men don't hear often enough. Being memorable is not about intensity, drama, or grand gestures. It is about consistency and presence. You were seen because you were real. You mattered because you showed up as yourself. Don't abandon that now by trying to become someone else. Be consistent. Be calm. Be intentional. That is how a high-value man moves through the world. So don't wait for validation. Don't wait for signs. Don't wait for permission. You must act in alignment with your values, your goals, your standards. Build a life you respect. That life will naturally attract women who respect you too. Masculine energy flows best when it is directed, not scattered. When you focus it inward first, everything else aligns outward. This isn't about winning someone back. It's about reclaiming your momentum. It's about understanding that impact without attachment is freedom. And freedom, more than anything, is what makes a man compelling at any age. 6. What you must not do next. Here is the truth you need to hear, delivered clean and without hesitation, because this is not about games. It is about mastery, self-command, and living from a place of certainty. When you notice that strange sign that proves you live in her head rent-free, the single most important move is restraint, because the moment you rush to label it, mention it, or confirm it, you dissolve the very tension that created it in the first place, and as Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events, which is Old Stoic wisdom that applies perfectly to modern relationships, modern distractions, and modern ego traps. So hear this clearly. Do not bring it up. Do not confront. Do not ask questions that fish for validation. Do not announce awareness, because acknowledgement collapses mystery, and mystery is oxygen for attention, while silence is structure, and structure is what an iron mind understands instinctively. Instead, you do nothing outwardly and everything inwardly, because stillness is not passivity, it is discipline, and discipline is how Stoicism win plays out in real life, especially for men between 35 and 70 who have already learned that chasing clarity often kills attraction. So you let the signs continue without commentary, because unfinished stories stay alive longer than explained ones, and while you are quiet, you escalate your life in visible but grounded ways, not to provoke reaction, not to posture, but because a man who is building, growing, learning, and expanding naturally becomes harder to ignore, and as Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do, which means you invest in your health, your work, your social world, your purpose, your presence, because attention follows direction, and direction comes from commitment to something larger than approval. When she eventually reaches out, and patterns say she will, you do not rush, you do not unload emotion. You do not explain your silence. You stay warm but brief, respectful but contained, because you are setting the frame, not by force, but by consistency, responding on your timeline, not hers, because your time is structured, not empty. And this is where modern life rewards those with an iron mind, since endless availability signals nothing to protect, nothing to prioritize, nothing to earn, and scarcity here is not a tactic. It is a byproduct of a full life, because attention that costs nothing has no value, and value is created by boundaries, by rhythm, by presence that arrives intentionally. This is Old Stoic wisdom translated into today's world of instant messages and constant noise, where most men talk themselves out of respect by oversharing, over-explaining, and overreacting, while you do the opposite. You simplify, you center, you move forward, and you let outcomes chase you instead of the other way around, because as Seneca said, "He who is brave is free," and bravery here means trusting your position without demanding reassurance. Repeat this until it locks in. Silence preserves leverage, progress multiplies interest, structure builds value, and patience wins. This is how Stoicism win shows up in real situations, not in theory, but in daily choices, and the advice is simple but not easy. Do not negotiate from curiosity. Do not surrender your calm for certainty. Do not let your ego interrupt your strategy, because mastery is quiet mastery, is measured, mastery is magnetic, and men who understand this stop reacting and start directing. They master life by mastering themselves. They move through modern relationships with clarity instead of confusion. And they recognize that living rent-free in someone's head is not something you point out. It is something you maintain by being grounded, occupied, and self-directed, which is exactly what an iron mind does, again and again, until it becomes identity. Until Old Stoic wisdom becomes instinct, until Stoicism win is no longer something you think about, but something you live. If this message sharpened your perspective and reminded you of the power of restraint, focus, and self-command, support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs clarity, and subscribing for more grounded psychology and life mastery. Now, to lock this lesson into your mind, comment this affirmation below and mean it when you write it, because repetition builds identity and identity shapes outcomes. I move with patience. I build my life first, and my presence has value. Comment it to remember it, comment it to own it, and comment it to reinforce the mindset of calm confidence, self-direction, and quiet strength. 7. The real psychological truth. Here is the real psychological truth, stripped of noise and dressed in clarity. The human brain is not designed to rest on what is complete. It circles what is unfinished, what slipped through the fingers, what never got a clean ending. And that single fact explains more about attraction than most advice ever will, because when something feels unresolved, the mind keeps returning to it, not out of weakness, but out of design. And this is known as the Zeigarnik effect, a quiet rule of memory wear. Incomplete experiences stay mentally active while finished ones fade into the background, which means that absence can sometimes echo louder than presence. And when a woman tries to push a thought away, tries to be rational, tries to stay busy. Her own mind may do the opposite, pulling that thought forward again and again, not because she wants to, but because resistance creates attention, a principle explored in female psychology long before dating advice ever touched it, and that ironic loop is what psychologists call ironic process theory, often explained with the white bear example, where the harder you try not to think of something, the more vividly it appears, so don't misunderstand the point. Don't assume this is about manipulation or games. That is not the message. The message is awareness, because silence can outperform chasing when silence creates space for the mind to wander. And mystery can feel more engaging than total transparency when everything has already been said too quickly. That is not a rule, it is a tendency, and psychology tricks only work when they align with natural cognitive patterns rather than forced behavior. So don't chase to relieve your own anxiety. Be still when stillness feels honest. That is the difference, because the brain fills gaps on its own, and it often fills them with emotion, memory, and imagination, especially when a connection ended without a clear emotional conclusion. And this is where many men misunderstand the moment, thinking they must act immediately, explain everything, clarify every feeling, but clarity too early can close a loop that the mind was still exploring, and once a loop is closed, attention moves on. Not out of cruelty but efficiency. The brain conserves energy. Unfinished stories pull energy in. Finished stories release it. So be deliberate. Don't confuse effort with value. Be intentional with silence, not as a tactic but as a choice. Because the real power is not in being remembered, it is in knowing you will be remembered whether you speak or not, and understanding this gives you calm rather than urgency, and calm changes how you show up everywhere else, including how to fall in love in a grounded, adult way. Not driven by fear of loss, but guided by self-respect. And here is the part most people skip. These signs mean nothing on their own. They only matter if you decide what to do with them. Knowledge without choice is noise. Awareness without action is unfinished business of a different kind. So maybe you reach out because it aligns with who you are and what you want, not because you are trying to provoke a reaction. Maybe you don't because silence reflects growth and boundaries, not indifference. Or maybe you've already moved forward and this insight simply gives you peace instead of doubt, and that is a valid outcome too, because the goal is not control, the goal is clarity, and clarity allows you to choose instead of react. 2. Respond instead of chase, to lead your own life rather than orbit someone else's attention. And that is where psychology tricks become wisdom rather than gimmicks, when they help you understand human behavior without turning it into a contest. Because female psychology, like all psychology, responds to emotional consistency more than dramatic gestures, to grounded presence more than constant explanation, and to self-directed men who don't disappear to be missed, but live fully whether they are missed or not. So don't overthink the signs, don't build fantasies, be observant, be calm, be honest with yourself, because the real advantage is not living rent-free in someone else's head. It is owning your own, and when you do that, attraction becomes a byproduct rather than a pursuit. How to fall in love becomes less about strategy and more about alignment, and every decision you make comes from strength, not pressure, from understanding, not fear, and that is the final truth worth keeping. Hey, thanks for watching. Here's the real takeaway. Attraction isn't built by chasing or over-explaining yourself. It's built when your presence actually matters. If someone only notices you when you're constantly giving, that's not connection, that's habit. But when your absence creates curiosity, that's impact. So my honest advice, stop trying to prove your value. Let your actions be consistent, calm, and intentional, and give people the space to feel what it's like when you're not always there. That's when interest becomes real. If this shifted how you see things, drop impact in the comments. And subscribe, because next week I'll share the one sentence that makes her reach out first. You won't want to miss it.